right, some fan call-ins, or not call-ins, but comments about their favorite retro movies. Calmy13 said Charade and How to Catch a Thief, and also Guys and Dolls. Those are all in the 60s, I think. Those
Guys and Dolls.
Those are like Humphrey Bogart and...
I know what it is. I'm just saying, I think that was 50s?
Maybe. Black and white, probably.
Yeah, that's not retro to me.
That's not... How is that not
That's
retro?
old.
That's just old fart movies.
Turner Classic Movies? How dare you, sir?
Well, yeah. Turner Classic
I
Movies.
don't think I've ever seen the movie Guys and Dolls, but I did see the play.
I have.
Then you've
I've
seen the
it.
movie.
I've seen the
Pretty
movie.
much the same thing.
Luck
Just
be a
saying.
lady tonight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want
Hey,
to
Dollface.
I have
Why don't you-
culture.
Why don't you show us your
Maybe
fun
that's why
curves?
I'm like, I lean towards those older movies because I've seen all those ones. I haven't seen the 80s movies as much. Maybe. I don't know.
You were born in the year I graduated from high school.
You were born with an asshole, Doris. You don't need Chuck.
Another comment from Lime Chili 777 said The Jackal, Cliffhanger, and Soldier. The Soldier? Is that what it's called? With Kurt Russell?
With Kurt Russell.
Yeah, the Soldier.
No, it's just Soldier.
Just Soldier?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was a pretty cool movie.
I don't think I've ever seen that one.
I don't either.
Kurt Russell broke his hand in that movie.
Ooh.
Had to do it with a broken
Fun
hand.
trivia. Broken hands.
Did he also break the movies?
That was the movie
think-
where he was the super soldier
Yeah.
that got sent to the other planet, the garbage planet or whatever.
The prison planet, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty
And
cool.
then he had to fight his former brothers in arms.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
It wasn't. It was a terrible movie.
I think
The Jackal was also pretty bad too, with Bruce
it?
Willis. Yeah,
I think
Oh, yeah,
Cliffhanger is
Jack was
probably
not good.
Cliffhanger's up there for one of my favorite
yeah.
Stallone.
It's a good
movies, though.
Stallone flick.
Still, yeah.
You know they're remaking it with a female lead.
Oh, of course they are.
Yeah,
We're going to have to talk about this.
Is it like Ronda Rousey or somebody?
probably. I don't know.
I'm not
Rousey.
watching it.
What if it's Gina Carano?
I don't care.
All right, let's do some fan questions. We've
Okay.
got one from Nick Sheffer, Patreon of the podcast. He says,
Nick.
"What is it about classic sci-fi and TV in general from the 60s, 70s, and 80s that, despite being more campy and possible worse effects, makes it more reachable than stuff from the 90s and early 2000s? Do you agree, or do you find this to be biased or not true?"
Well, you know the big difference here is that the early sci-fi that he's referring to was actually written by actual science fiction like novelists, like people that Hollywood recruited from, publishing to write this stuff that, ends up being like kind of like classic and, stands the test of time. Nowadays, it's just like your brother's sister's cousin's roommate like wrote a script, so we're going to punch it out there. So it really comes down to the talent of the writing behind it. I mean, and plus during that era, like there weren't these science fiction ideas weren't as fully explored as they are now. So there was a lot of nostalgia factor as well, where that sense of wonder and seeing something for the first time and being interested in it. I think it kind of colors people's perception of those earlier
I definitely think people look
things.
back with rose-colored glasses with these movies. And the other thing too, I think the limited technology of those days kind of forced the people to be more creative and take the extra step. Whereas today, you have a director who's like, "Oh, I have this idea. I don't know exactly how to make it work. I'll just send it to the computer guys, and they'll digitally put something in there, and we'll fix it in post." Like it's not. You couldn't have done that back then. You had to have had everything planned out and everything ready to go, and film it physically.
like the whole practical effects thing. Like, I don't know if you knew this or not, but so for Escape from New York, they had to build an actual miniature set of New York and use
It looks
that,
like a miniature set when
and use that for like the aerial shots and all the compositing and stuff. But they actually took that set and reused it for Blade Runner, where they like redressed it as like this futuristic, city. And it was just a different era where something about those practical effects made it feel more real.
Yeah.
Because it was real.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, than the CG stuff that we have now.
I agree. Jude, what do you think about this? What is it about these old 80s movies that makes you connect with them more than the modern ones? Like if there was a modern zombie movie, would you be as enthusiastic about it?
I don't I think I've never thought from Kadish's perspective, but everything that he said kind of made sense to me. Like, everything about when they're creating these like new blockbusters now, it seems just kind of lazy in the creation of it. And I too get very frustrated with like bad writing and lazy writing. But I don't know. There's just something about, for me personally, the genre of like the late 70s and 80s. It's just, it harkens back to like stuff that I used to watch when it would air on television when I was a kid. Like, and it's just the nostalgia of it. I like it. And like, I used to grow up watching those like terribly campy USA Up All Night movies with like Gilbert Gottfried and Rhonda Shear. And I lived for those and loved them. And I still have a very nostalgic place in my heart for anything that's like very campy and from the 80s. I'll at least give it a go.
Yeah. Vader, what about you? Do you think modern movies are worse than the old ones, or is it just a perspective thing?
I don't think they're worse. I just think they're made different now. You know, I look at 80s movies like we watched this week, and they're just pure nostalgia for me. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I also think about movies like Night of the Comet, for instance. You know, it was made in 1984, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, that's 7-8 years after Star Wars came out. So I have a hard time with movies like that because I'm going to compare it to something that drove my inner nerd crazy for my whole life, and it doesn't even compare, you know. And I know it's not fair to compare budgets and all that kind of stuff, but you know, there was a lot of movies back then that were good. You know, Indiana Jones came out in 1982, Star Wars came out in 1977, the Star Trek movies, you know, they were capable of making some really good special effects movies back then. So when I see these campy kind of weird movies, it's an interesting thing.
There's a certain charm to them.
Yeah.
Though.
That's really interesting that you say the phrase like what drove my nerd, because like the things that drove your nerd are the things that you're interested in now.
Yeah.
And that's just interesting, like, because my perspective is this is what drove my nerd, and this is the things that these are the things that I'm still interested in now. So like, and I'm not interested in
It's completely fair.
like the same
Star
things
Wars
that you
and
are.
stuff,
Yeah,
yeah.
like Star Trek and Star Wars.
I like big budget tentpole movies. I like movies that like make me go out of the theater going, "Holy crap! I can't believe what they pulled off."
Yeah.
You know.
Do you feel like what's the most recent modern movie that made you feel that way? Big tentpole, special effects.
Probably one of the Avengers movies.
Endgame came to mind.
Yeah.
Do you like more watching things in the theater, or do you like watching them more from like your couch and streaming?
For these kind of movies, I want the theater experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I want the 60-foot screen. I want the super surround
She's
sound.
like, I don't want to leave the house. I don't want to leave the couch.
Well, we'll talk
you know,
about
I
this
watched,
later, but
just for example, I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark at the theater last year.
yeah.
Because they had that special weekend. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, and it's
Still holds up.
always cool to go back and see those movies the way they're meant to be seen.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, if Night of the Comet came around and see in the theater, I'd probably go watch it now. just to see
Just
it.
to have some fun.
Yeah, it would be cool.
There's
you
still
know?
a drive-through in Vegas.
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's one.
I've been.
Yeah, I've been there.
You
a
mean
couple
a drive-in?
Drive-in, drive-through, whatever.
There are plenty of
One you
drive-thrus
get
and
beer,
drive-ins.
the other one you watch movies and also get beer.
And also, just pack it in the back. All right. The next listener question is from Andre Hutchins. He runs the Backseat Director podcast. You guys can go check him out. He's a pretty cool guy.
I've listened to it. It's good.
He's got the catchiest freaking song.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous. Okay, says, okay, salty nerds, here's my question. Are the 80s action hero genre era or genre completely dead? Will we ever see the likes of Stallone, Schwarzenegger in Hollywood again? The closest thing I can think of is Dwayne Johnson, but not even his movies measure up, in my opinion.
Well, they're all women now.
I don't. I don't think
That's dark.
I don't think the modern politics of Hollywood would allow them to make a movie like the first Predator, for example,
Or Tango and Cash.
or Tango and Cash. They're just, people are so caught up in their stupid politics and their easily offended culture now that they're not allowed to do stuff like that.
Is
You
there
know? I
anything-
mean, listen to how we talked earlier today. It's like, oh, well, they made a reference about the astronaut from 1961 and her curves.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, why don't you go make me a sandwich back in the galley? People, they would lose their fucking minds
Yeah.
if they did that today.
Yeah.
You know, it would blow up every social media thing in the world.
But then you look at other movies, like, just for instance, Kevin Smith. He's got some raunchy comedy in his stuff. I mean, he's got a male dude
Kevin-
just screwing a donkey in one of his movies, and that's not like, oh my god,
That was the 90s, though.
that's the
was-
90s.
Also, Kevin Smith doesn't care.
Yeah, well,
Kevin Smith is going to make Kevin Smith movies. And if the theaters don't want to run them, he'll take them on a tour himself and show them to people who buy tickets at his
Yeah.
shows.
Yeah. Look at
And,
someone like
and I forgot what I was going to say.
look at someone like Tarantino, who puts in some of
Oh,
the most
yes.
un-PC stuff
Yes.
imaginable in his movies. And when people try to call him out on it, he's just like, I reject your premise.
yeah.
You know? Like this
Oh,
is,
that was
this is my movie, and if you don't like it, screw you.
That was a great quote when they were
was
yelling at him for not giving Margot Robbie enough lines in his latest movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like, well, how come Margot Robbie didn't have this many lines, but the male characters had this many lines? And he's like,
That was it.
I reject your premise, or whatever he said. It was the
That was
quote.
at Cannes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, but it is interesting because if you look at the action hero genre in the 80s, it's evolved in a very different way in modern times, because 80s was very much about like the blue collar like action hero, like the Bruce Willis Die Hard, the Martin Riggs Lethal Weapon, and today you've got like Hobbs and Shaw and the Fast and Furious Vin Diesel. And these are, this generation's action heroes. But even to bring that to an even different place is all the comic book superheroes, where they're literal action heroes. And so it's going to be interesting to see, like, when we're old and decrepit, all these youngsters talking about their nostalgic
everything.
movies.
I think even these modern action heroes, I mean, and The Rock is like
Yeah, you got
the only
Jason.
example I can think of. Even his movies aren't on the same level, I don't think, as some of those old 80s ones, because he's playing cartoon caricatures of himself.
Wait,
Like that Hobbs and Shaw, where he's holding a chain with 4 Jeeps on one side
He just
and a
wheeled a
helicopter on the
helicopter.
other.
But Schwarzenegger,
yeah, but Schwarzenegger
Schwarzenegger
arguably-
made a career out of doing that exact same
Exactly.
No, he
yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
Not like
Dude,
not to that extreme.
Commando. He was like just unlimited ammo
But
God
that's
mode.
not the same.
I think
That's
it
not
is.
even remotely close to this.
I think it is the same.
I'd have to agree with Alex on this one.
I think it's the same
You
thing.
guys
Just
are wrong. Okay?
so like, yeah, these old '80s movies. I think it's just our perspective watching these movies. We grew up with them, and I'm younger than you guys, but I still grew up on those same types of movies. I don't remember watching like a '90s action movie as much. Nothing really comes to mind. I remember those.
Compare the original Total Recall with the remake.
Oh, it's awful.
People don't watch or even think about the remake. They forget it even exists.
Yeah,
It's 'cause it
Because
was
it's
bad.
not as good.
Yeah.
But we're talking about like
I also think it has to do with the sensibility of the filmmakers who are behind those movies. Like, we talked today about Tango and Cash and how John Peters and Sylvester Stallone were like big influences on how that movie turned out. And those were the guys who, like, their egos just kind of fueled the movies of the 80s. And you don't have people like that in Hollywood, making these. You have like people like Alex Kurtzman instead, making.
why'd you have to say his name? Why'd you have to say that name?
Now you're tainted the whole podcast.
He's the perfect example of like a producer who churns out like poor movies, whereas somehow these crazy people from the 80s actually ended up making good movies. Like, for instance, Rambo 3. As much as bad as Rambo 3 is, like, you can watch that movie and just be like, yeah, like this is a Rambo movie.
So I think we do have those people. I think guys like Vin Diesel, who may have made 10 Fast and Furious movies. You got
those-
Jason,
Bloodshot,
yeah,
Jason
Bloodshot,
Statham.
Jason Statham. He's done a ton of different movies. The Meg, that is like,
terrible.
if the Meg came out in the 80s, like that would be one of those nostalgic 80s dumb movies.
Yeah, it was called Jaws.
Yeah, Jaws, except bigger and better.
That movie made me upset. Like, I was furious when we came out of the theater.
I haven't seen the Meg yet, and it's only because my daughter wanted to watch it with me, but then she moved, and I've been waiting for her to come visit, and it's been sitting on my DVR for like
Oh, you still have it?
months.
Dude.
No, it's just, and I haven't watched it yet.
I keep saying I need to rewatch it to see if I actually hate it as much as I
You
think I
probably
do.
still hated it.
I know
I
will,
enjoyed it.
but
I enjoyed it. I mean, they had Dwight Schrute in there, for Christ's sake. It was freaking hilarious.
He was the best part of the movie.
It was the
I
best
read
part.
all of the Meg books. So when this movie was coming out, like Kadish can attest, I was so beside myself excited for this movie. I got a t-shirt.
You guys don't understand how much Jude loves sharks.
I love them and fear them equal. And when this movie, we went to the movies and we saw this movie, and the whole time I was just like, but the book.
I think if you compare the 80s action stars with the current batch,
Yeah,
the
there's
80s,
no comparison.
there's no comparison. There is no comparison. Everybody from Jean-Claude Van Damme to Dolph Lundgren and you know,
Well, I think-
Stallone and
Well, it is
everybody
funny.
is
Like,
just-
if you look at the Expendables movies, where like they tried to merge like the
Yeah.
All the
old-
new action
like
stars.
the new action
Yeah.
stars with the older ones.
Like, nobody cared about the new ones.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, they were overshadowed by the old,
I mean,
you know,
you-
the
And
old school.
also- You've got, like,
in the
Chris
80s,
Hemsworth.
Everything was unapologetic, and now
Yeah.
everything is apologetic.
see, and
so
that's
it
the
just doesn't
difference.
mesh.
That's the difference between then and now. Is people didn't care if you got offended watching
Right.
those movies back then.
Yeah.
The thought didn't even
nowadays-
occur to anyone.
Nowadays, everybody
It'll-
has to make movies
Yeah.
because
It'll affect the box office.
somebody will write some bad shit on Rotten Tomatoes about it or something, you know. And
yeah.
it's just
Nobody wrote reviews in the 80s. There was two guys. They were called Siskel and Ebert.
that's it. You're not wrong. So
It's definitely the culture has changed, but I think I still think that there are action movie stars. Dwayne Johnson is a perfect example.
and they make children's movies like Jumanji.
I like those movies.
I
those
love
are
kids'
Jumanji.
movies.
no, those
So
are
was Jumanji.
Those are legit good movies.
Yeah.
They're still kids'
Jumanji was a
movies.
kid's movie. That was a fantastic Robin
She was
Williams
very-
movie.
was
Can
terrible.
you imagine Jumanji with Stallone and Schwarzenegger?
Yes, it's called Guardians of the
Oh,
Galaxy.
come on. You're out of here.
Zathora.
Guys, Mom, Dad, don't fight.
All right. Do we have any final thoughts for this this epic podcast about the retro rewatch?
Just we're never letting you choose another movie.
That's
again.
very true. Never again.
Yeah. Yeah, you need specific guidelines.
Yes.
Okay, you can only pick a movie from this year to this year.
There you go.
And it has
This
to
is
have,
what retro means.
Giving you a genre.
it has to have one of these three actors in it:
Yes.
Kurt Russell or Sylvester Stallone,
Yeah.
or both.
Jean-Claude Van Damme.